What is up, Coaster Conquerors? It is me, Austin, and today I will be counting down my top 25 favorite coasters that I have ridden. I know that it isn't quite the end of the year, but I am at a point in the year at which I doubt my top 25 will change, although it has changed very significantly since my last video ranking my top overall coasters, which I uploaded nearly 4 years ago. Before I dive into the list, please be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel with post notifications on to be notified of more theme park related content like this. I would also like to thank y'all for the channel's recent accomplishment of 200 subscribers. I wouldn't have hit this number if it wasn't for y'all watching my videos, and even if it isn't a large milestone by YouTube standards, I still appreciate having the audience that I currently have, so thank y'all very much. Before we fully start this countdown, I would like to give an honorable mention to a couple of coasters that barely missed the cut. My first honorable mention goes to Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm in Buena Park, California. This ride originally opened in 1998 as a Custom Coasters International wooden coaster, and it was later retracked in 2016 by Great Coasters International. I got to ride this back in early June of this year, and I found it to have some very thrilling laterals from its CCI layout, as well as some great pacing and some solid airtime moments. And the coaster was also very enjoyable to ride thanks to its GCI track as well as its GCI Millennium Flyer trains. Another coaster I would like to give an honorable mention to is Thunderhead at Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Yet another wooden coaster, this one opened in 2004 and was manufactured by Great Coasters International. It has a very exciting twister layout with some great pacing, as well as some good airtime moments. I have ridden this ride on 2 separate visits to the park, the first of which being in June of 2017, and the second being in October of 2020. I found my rides on this during my first visit to the park to be pretty rough, but during my second visit, I found it to be much smoother, which definitely led to it shooting far up my coaster rankings. At the number 25 spot is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. This has gotta be my favorite coaster from Great Coasters International, as well as one of my favorite wooden coasters overall. Opened in 2017, this coaster features an out and back layout with some really quick pacing, as well as several back-to-back airtime moments, thus leading to one of the best GCI layouts out there. The coaster also has some interesting theming elements, with the ride being centered around the idea of going into this abandoned shed. Riders are warned during the lift hill not to go into the shed, and at the end of the ride, riders experience what secrets lie in this elusive shed. Though this may lead to a somewhat underwhelming ending in the brake run, I think the theming adds a sense of suspense to the ride overall, and it certainly doesn't take away from its thrilling coaster experience in my opinion. Although this ride, being just 109.2 feet tall, is overshadowed by the neighboring hypercoaster Diamondback, as well as by the park's Gigacoaster Orion, I'd still consider this to be the best coaster in the park, in large part due to the ride's fast-paced layout. At the number 24 spot is The Voyage at Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana. I actually got the privilege of having this coaster as my 200th coaster credit back in late June of this year. Opened in 2006, this Gravity Group wooden coaster towers above the park at a maximum height of 159 feet and reaches a top speed of 67 miles per hour, which are some impressive stats for a traditional wooden coaster. It is also a very lengthy coaster with a track length of 6,442 feet. When I rode this, I didn't think much of the start of the ride, which features some wooden camelbacks with some decent floater airtime. However, the ride really starts to shine shortly after this when it begins its twister layout, which is very fast-paced and filled with some strong lateral forces. Following the ride's mid-course brake run, the triple down features some strong airtime on its latter 2 dips, although I imagine that would be even better if I rode it during Hollywood Nights, which I believe was shortly before my park visit, which I hear they turn off the mid-course trims, which that just sounds awesome. The ride also continues to have various fun twister moments as it makes its way back to the station. Although I find this to be one of my favorite wooden coasters, what holds it back a bit for me from being as great as some enthusiasts consider it to be is that it's not necessarily the smoothest wooden coaster I've ridden, and I wouldn't say its layout, though being certainly an awesome one, doesn't fully make up for that. I know I should certainly expect wooden coasters to have some bite, and this coaster is still smoother than the park's other woodies, especially the Raven. But I do think this coaster would rank a good bit higher if it was on about the same level of smoothness with some of the aforementioned GCI coasters. Regardless though, this is certainly one of my favorite wooden coasters and one of the best ever made, and it still receives a worthy spot in my top 25. At the number 23 spot is Candymonium at Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Opened in 2020, this Bolliger and Mabillard hypercoaster serves as one of the newest major coasters in its park, as well as its tallest and fastest, at a maximum height of 210 feet and a maximum speed of 76 miles per hour. I find this coaster to be a very enjoyable B&M hyper as a result of its very smooth layout as well as its plentiful airtime moments that are typical of any B&M hyper really. But I also think this coaster has a solid out and back layout and a really cool visual at the front of the park where the ride wraps around a fountain shortly before the ride ends. Overall, this is definitely a very fun B&M hyper, and one that I'd even consider, in a way, a successor to the next coaster on my list. At the number 22 spot is Mako at SeaWorld Orlando in Orlando, Florida. This is another B&M hyper which opened a few years prior to 2016, serving as one of the first hypercoasters in Florida. This was also my first ever hypercoaster, and I first got to ride this within weeks of its initial opening. The ride reaches a maximum height and a drop of 200 feet with a maximum speed of 73 miles per hour. And it features an out and back layout with plenty of airtime filled camelbacks, as well as a hammerhead turn filled with positives, as well as an ejector filled speed hill, which are some awesome elements for the coaster. I also find the ride's shark theming to be really cool and fitting for the coaster, and it has an awesome and suspenseful soundtrack as it leaves the station and ascends its towering lift hill. I've ridden this coaster countless times since its opening 9 years ago, and it has never failed to hold up as my favorite coaster in its park, as well as even my favorite B&M hyper despite having ridden ones that many enthusiasts consider to be better. It never fails to offer a very smooth ride experience, and it certainly never fails to offer some amazing airtime. At the number 21 spot is Storm Runner at Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Despite this coaster being a fairly short ride experience, I find it to be the most complete of the intimate accelerator coasters that I've ridden. Opened in 2004, this ride begins with an intense hydraulic launch, bringing the train from 0 to 72 miles per hour in just 2 seconds. The ride then climbs a 150-foot top hat and descends an even larger 180-foot drop to reach a maximum speed of 75 miles per hour. The ride then features a few unique inversions, those of which being a cobra loop, a heartline roll, and a flying snake dive. It then rises through a twisted double up shortly before reaching the brake run. This coaster certainly has a unique, thrilling, and forceful layout that may go by very quickly, but its intense launch and its thrilling elements make it a very memorable experience, and I'm certainly glad that this accelerator coaster has a little more to it than simply a fast launch and a top hat. At the number 20 spot is Steel Dragon 2000 at Nagashima Spa Land in Kuwana-mie, Japan. Opened in the year 2000, this Morgan Giga Coaster is regarded as the longest large-scale roller coaster in the world at a track length of 8,133.2 feet, although that record is set to be shattered by the upcoming Falcons flight at Six Flags Qiddiya in Saudi Arabia. The ride also stands as the tallest and fastest coaster in Japan, reaching a maximum height of 318.2 feet and a maximum speed of 95 miles per hour. I got to ride this coaster very recently during my Japan trip, and it is a really awesome Giga coaster that I feel like tends to be overshadowed amongst enthusiasts by the North American Gigas, but I also feel like this coaster shares a similar level of quality to those. During its elongated and large-scale twister section, I find that the ride offers some very intense positive and lateral forces that I really felt during my ride on it. Despite some slightly awkward track profiling, particularly during this part of the ride, the coaster as a whole goes through its layout quite smoothly, at least I found that to be the case. I also really enjoyed the second half of the coaster, in which, following its mid-course, the ride features multiple back-to-back airtime hills that offer some pretty surprisingly good ejector airtime. This coaster is truly a one-of-a-kind experience, and it is certainly one of my favorite coasters in Japan from my experience. Coming back to the States at number 19 is Lightning Run at Kentucky Kingdom in Louisville, Kentucky. Like the previous ride, I find this to be a very unique coaster, but for some very different reasons. Serving as one of the shortest coasters in my top 25, this Chance Rides Hyper GTX coaster reaches a maximum height of just 100 feet and a maximum speed of 55 miles per hour. The coaster opened in 2014 as the first coaster of its model, and although a couple more of this kind of coaster are set to open fairly soon, this one is still the only one around. However, what this ride lacks in height, it really makes up for in its layout. This ride is jam-packed with numerous ejector airtime moments, as well as some twists and turns that are all taken at a very fast pace, making for what might be a very surprisingly thrilling ride experience. It truly is a shame that there aren't more of these Hyper GTX coasters out there, but I'm certainly hoping with a couple more on the way that parks will continue to install this unique type of coaster. At the number 18 spot is X2 at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. This prototype 4th dimension coaster opened in 2002 as simply X, and it was the final coaster manufactured by Aerodynamics prior to them going defunct. Without a doubt, I can confidently say that this is by far my favorite aero coaster that I've ridden, as well as possibly the best one they have ever made. This has got to be the most wild type of coaster out there, since not only does it feature a 215-foot drop with a maximum speed of 76 miles per hour and a very twisted layout, but the seats flip all throughout the coaster, and it's a control flip. It's not a free spin, but that still makes this one of the craziest coaster experiences ever developed. All of its elements are very forceful, and the way the riders face straight down during the drop and just flip back up right before reaching the bottom is just beyond wild. I would actually rank this coaster even higher overall if it was just a bit smoother, but I still find it to be very worthy of my top 20 because of the wild layout and the flipping that the ride has to offer. It is truly a shame that Aero could not continue evolving following this revolutionary last hurrah of theirs, but at least this type of coaster didn't necessarily end with X2. Just barely beating X2 in its same park is Twisted Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. This is a very unique Rocky Mountain construction hybrid coaster which opened in 2015, replacing its classic dueling predecessor Colossus. What's so unique about this RMC hybrid is its lengthy ride experience, as well as the fact that it is meant to duel with itself, whilst being one continuous coaster layout. And it accomplishes this by having 2 lift hills, which is very unique for a coaster of its type. This coaster features plenty of airtime moments throughout the ride, as well as some cool interactions between the trains, with a high five element, as well as its Top Gun stall, which is named after the film in which Tom Cruise's character Maverick goes inverted, if you will. Because of its fun layout that duels with itself, I'd consider this the best coaster in its park, although I do find the one area that it does suffer in is its inconsistency with the dueling, but that's honestly more of an operations issue than simply the ride's own fault. Despite that, this is still a really awesome RMC coaster. At the number 16 spot is Fury 325 at Carowinds, which lies on the border between Charlotte, North Carolina and Fort Mill, South Carolina. This B&M Giga Coaster, being one of the tallest coasters that I've ridden overall, reaches a maximum height of 325 feet and a maximum speed of 95 miles per hour, and there is no doubt you feel that speed. I actually had the privilege of experiencing this ride as my 100th coaster credit back in July of 2021, and my first ever ride on it was actually in the very front row. This actually ended up being my favorite way to experience this ride, since the speed is really felt in the front and that massive drop is just even more intimidating. I also found the front row to be the smoothest during my rides on it, though that may have just been me. Not only is this a really fast-paced coaster, but there are also some good airtime moments and some solid positive forces as well. there's also a very freaky near miss towards the latter half of the ride, as well as a unique treble clef element about midway through the ride where the train follows that element with a dive underneath the pathway that leads into the park entrance. This is truly a one-of-a-kind B&M coaster, and it has gotta be my favorite coaster from B&M as well. At the number 15 spot is the Photon or Yellow side of Stardust Racers at Universal Epic Universe in Orlando, Florida. Serving as the newest coasters I've ridden on this list, this Mock Rides multi-launch coaster, as well as its other half, opened back in May of this year, and these are certainly two of the best coasters in all of Universal. The ride's first launch is very unique because it sort of accelerates in two parts during that launch, and its first half features some surprising ejector airtime moments. After the ride's second launch, the two coaster sides interact with this yellow side featuring a barrel roll down drop over its descending counterpart, as well as various interactions between it and the dueling train throughout the rest of its layout. However, just barely beating the yellow side at number 14 is its counterpart, the Pulsar or green side of Stardust Racers. Though these coasters are very similar, I find this side to just be barely better, since the visual provided during its second launch is even better on this side as it flips over the Photon side with its 0G roll, and then proceeds to witness the other side flip over it during its descent. Although these coasters are basically almost the exact same in quality, there is a distinction to be made, as I just did, and they both share well-earned spots right at the bottom of my top 15 overall. At the number 13 spot is Skyrush at Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Opened in 2012, this prototype wing hypercoaster from Intamin has been known throughout most of its operating life as a controversial one due to its restraints. I got to ride this coaster in July of 2022, and though I have heard that the coaster trains have improved since then, I still thoroughly enjoyed this then polarizing coaster as it was regardless. Though the ride towers at a maximum height of 200 feet, its really quick cable lift hill allows the train to ascend its large lift hill in a very short duration of time, and the ride's maximum speed of 75 miles per hour can really be felt following that initial drop. Additionally, I got to ride this in the back left wing seat, in part thanks to a suggestion by a fellow enthusiast, which I found to be a great choice despite the ride's restraints allegedly being worse in the wing seats, since I really felt the ride's forces and its initial drop in that seat. Not only does this ride feature some really intense elements, with it reaching a maximum of 5 Gs, but it also has some scarily strong ejector airtime, as well as some wildly fast pacing all throughout its layout. I know I've been mentioning the controversial restraints from the time quite a bit, but I'll be honest and say that they did not bother me too much despite them being pretty thigh-crushing, and the quality of the ride certainly made up for it. However, based on what I've heard, it sounds like the park certainly made a good decision by upgrading the ride's restraints, so now it's a bit less polarizing. Also, since I have not been to the park since that last visit, this is my favorite coaster in the park. This means that unfortunately, Wildcat's Revenge will not be on this list since I have not experienced it yet, though I have experienced its predecessor Wildcat, and I do hope to revisit to ride a coaster that could potentially dethrone Skyrush for me. At the number 12 spot is Intimidator 305, now set to reopen as Pantherian at King's Dominion in Doswell, Virginia. Opened in 2010, this Intamin Giga Coaster has gotta be my favorite of all the Giga Coasters that I've ridden, even including the aforementioned Fury 325. This coaster reaches a maximum height of 305 feet, which is ascended quickly thanks to its cable lift, as well as a maximum speed of 90 miles per hour. What this coaster is best known for is its crazy intensity, as, like Skyrush, it reaches up to 5 Gs. Following its massive drop, the ride features a very intense turnaround into a large airtime hill that is followed by some very fast-paced and intense twists and turns all throughout the rest of its layout. If there was a Giga that could be nothing but just thrilling and wild, this coaster would absolutely be it. I consider this genuinely one of the more wild coaster layouts I've ever experienced, and I certainly hope that it can reopen soon so that enthusiasts can soon experience what I consider to currently be peak Giga Coaster. Quick little update as I'm editing the video, this coaster actually is back open as of, I believe, August 6th. At the time I recorded the voiceover for this video, It was still like standing but not operating and still like awaiting its reopening, but now it's back open, just letting y'all know. At the number 11 spot is Maverick at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Opened in 2007, this one-of-a-kind Intamin Blitz coaster seemed to follow the conclusion of the park's prior commitment to an ongoing coaster war in which parks closely competed to claim some major coaster world records. And the reason I say that is that following their tallest and fastest coaster yet in 2003, this coaster is a fairly short one at a maximum height of 105 feet, while truly shining in its layout and pacing. The ride begins with a very interesting LSM launch lift hill and a beyond vertical 95-degree drop. And right off the bat, the ride proceeds into some fast-paced twists and turns, a unique twisted horseshoe roll element, and even a moment of brief ejector in a fast-paced camelback. The ride then slows down into a dark tunnel before launching into its maximum speed of 75 miles per hour and immediately turning out of the tunnel following its launch. The ride continues with fast-paced twists, turns, and overbanks before its eventual conclusion. Talk about a small ride that really packs a punch. This is truly one of the best layouts I've experienced on a coaster like this, and it's one you can really feel the speed of, thus cementing it as one of the best coasters at America's Roller Coast. Now starting off the top 10 is Pantheon at Busch Gardens Williamsburg in Williamsburg, Virginia. Serving as one of the newest coasters in its park, this Intamin multi-launch coaster opened in 2022 and is, in my opinion, the best coaster in its park. This ride features a very interesting layout, beginning with a launch into a zero-G roll and a couple of small outer bank turns. The ride then enters a swing launch in which it begins to climb its top hat, then rolls back and launches into a towering backwards vertical spike, and then rolls forward again to launch full speed at 73 miles per hour into its 178-foot top hat. The ride then follows this with an outer bank to airtime hill, which serves as a really cool airtime moment before turning into a pretty elongated zero-G stall, which is then followed by some fast-paced twists and an overbanked hill into the brake run. Undoubtedly, this is a really fun and unique launch coaster with some really fun and unique elements, as well as some solid airtime on its outer banked hill and hang time on the stall. Overall, a really fun new-gen Intamin launch coaster that reminds me a lot of the next coaster. At the number 9 spot is Velocicoaster at Islands of Adventure in Orlando, Florida. Opened in 2021, this Intamin multi-launch coaster has gotta be the best ride in all of Universal Orlando Resort. I remember all the hype surrounding its opening, and though some enthusiasts rank it a bit higher than I do, I still find this to be an awesome coaster and one of the best theme park ride experiences overall, nevertheless. This ride, largely based on the Jurassic World film series, has some very immersive theming, particularly in the queue and the ride's first half, with the concept of the ride's theming being that it's a roller coaster within a raptor paddock. The ride starts off with an LSM launch from 0 to 50 miles per hour in 2 seconds, and the following Immelman and dive loop offer some interesting hang time. The ride then twists and turns throughout the raptor paddock and even includes a couple of ejector airtime moments in its first half. There's also some cool theming elements with like dinosaurs surrounding you and stuff, like it's really cool. But then as the train leaves the paddock, it hits a second LSM launch that takes it up to a maximum speed of 70 miles per hour prior to a quick ascent into a 155-foot top hat, which briefly provides some great views of the park. The ride then dives down and enters a zero-G stall that stands directly above the walkway leading up to the ride's entrance, and the coaster continues to twist, turn, and overbank twice prior to entering a speed hill and a barrel roll, labeled the Mosasaurus roll, over the park's lagoon. This wild and intimidating ride element is then followed by a twisted double up into the brake run. The fact that this ride manages to be so immersive and so incredibly thrilling just shows the lengths Universal is willing to go to in order to offer some amazing ride experiences. I would not have expected something like this to come to the park several years ago, especially not before Hagrid's opened, and it is certainly such an awesome and thrilling ride especially with its wild elements never before seen at this park resort, so I can see why this is widely considered one of the best coasters out there. This is going to be a very interesting number 8 pick, but this spot goes to Lightning Rod at Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. I must clarify, however, that I have not ridden this coaster since June of 2017, so I am entirely going off my memory from 8 years ago when this ride was in what many enthusiasts consider its prime. Opened in 2016, this Rocky Mountain construction coaster initially opened as the world's first and only launched wooden coaster, featuring an LSM launch lift hill, which reached a speed of 45 miles per hour. Following a small drop and ascent, the ride then featured a 165-foot drop and reached a maximum speed of 73 miles per hour, making it the world's fastest wooden coaster as well. The ride featured some very thrilling elements such as an overbank turn, an outer bank turn, and an ejector-filled quadruple down that I'd consider to be one of the craziest airtime moments out there. I got to experience this ride in its full, though at the time unreliable, glory back in 2017, since its launch and its original wooden track was still fully intact at the time. The reason I am yet to give this another ride, however, is that the ride was closed during my previous visit in 2020 for sections to be replaced with steel track. Additionally, though this coaster was initially an accomplishment, its launch proved so unreliable that in 2024, the launch was ultimately replaced with a traditional chain lift hill. I have heard that some of these changes have led to a reduction in the quality of this coaster, but I have also heard that it is still an awesome ride, which I do believe. My experience on this ride at the time was nothing but amazing, but I do hope to visit this park again to see how it rides in its current state and to get a more accurate opinion of it now. At the number 7 spot is Twisted Timbers at Kings Dominion in Doswell, Virginia. Opened in 2018, this RMC hybrid coaster serves as a replacement to the defunct Woody Hurler, and it is definitely a significantly improved replacement. Believe me, I rode the one at Carowinds and that one is so mad. Though the coaster is only 111 feet tall and reaches just 54 miles per hour as its maximum speed, the layout is nothing but thrilling and fast-paced once the ride descends its barrel roll drop. There are so many countless ejector airtime moments as well as a few really fun inversions as the coaster essentially goes out and back twice. The fast pacing and the plentiful ejector airtime on this ride make for a small but wild creation from RMC, and for that reason it manages to be the best coaster in its park, even with Intimidator 305 being there. At the number 6 spot is Wind Chaser at Kentucky Kingdom in Louisville, Kentucky. This may be a really hot take, but I find this coaster to be even better than Twisted Timbers. Opened in 2016 as Storm Chaser, this RMC hybrid is just a bit smaller at just 100 feet tall and a tad bit slower at 52 miles per hour, but its unique elements and layout is what I find it to give it the edge. Like Twisted Timbers, this ride also features a barrel roll drop, but it is then followed by a camelback and an overbank turn. These two elements are then followed by a weird turnaround element that starts off as an outer banked hill that quickly snaps into a left turn into another twisted hill, which leads into a smaller overbank turn. The ride then enters an ejector-filled airtime hill, a zero G roll, and a turn into a very wonky but thrilling trick track double up. This is then followed by a double down into a low to the ground overbanking turnaround before just barely somehow diving under itself and rising into the brake run. I think this is such a weird layout from RMC, but I think that's what I really appreciate about this coaster. Its elements are just so unique, and they are taken with enough awesome pacing that they are just all the more thrilling. I have heard some enthusiasts complain about the ending running slow, like the pacing being slow towards the end, but I absolutely did not find that to be the case on my rides on it back in late June, so I must have had some really good rides on it or something. But still, overall, this is a super underrated coaster, and that's why it manages to make my top 10. We are finally kicking off the top 5, and I have an interesting pick for this one. It is the original Top Thrill dragster at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Originally opened in 2003, this intimate accelerator served as the tallest and fastest roller coaster of its time, reaching an intimidating maximum height of 420 feet and a blazing fast speed of 120 miles per hour. The ride experience was very brief, featuring simply a hydraulic launch from 0 to 120 miles per hour in 3.5 seconds, a massive top hat, and a brake run labeled the finish line. Since I rode this in its original form in July of 2021, this has been the tallest and fastest coaster I have ever ridden, being the only one I've ridden above 400 feet and faster than 100 miles per hour. Though it was a very brief ride experience, it was truly like no other, and that launch was the craziest thing I had ever experienced on a coaster at the time, at least in my opinion, which alone made it one of my favorite coasters ever. However, not long after my only ride on it, the ride did permanently close in its original state after an incident involving its hydraulic launch, which has now led to what is now known as Top Thrill 2. This new version of the ride now features an LSM swing launch, as well as a 400-foot vertical backward spike, which looks awesome and very thrilling, but I unfortunately cannot imagine that the launch is as wild as it once was. However, I truly think the park made the right decision with the coaster, as it really was too unreliable of a coaster in its original form anyway. So I'm hoping the new version of the ride can prove better to run, and I do hope to eventually experience it. Also, this coaster has now briefly reclaimed its title as the tallest coaster in the world since the unfortunate permanent closure of King Ka, which I never got to ride unfortunately. But that record that Top Thrill 2 now holds will be soon beaten by Falcon's Flight. At the number 4 spot is Hakuge at Nagashima Spaland in Kuwanamiya, Japan. Opened in 2019, this is the only RMC hybrid in all of Asia, and it is certainly a top tier one. The coaster reaches a maximum height of 180.4 feet, as well as a top speed of 66.5 miles per hour, and the view of Japan's coast at the top of its lift hill is just amazing. Following the ride's drop, this ride features one of RMC's best layouts out there, filled with airtime, overbanks, outer banks, fast pacing, and a few fun inversions such as a 0G stall and a couple of 0G rolls. All the ejector airtime moments and the pacing just made this such an enjoyable and wild ride at the park, and it certainly does not let up. It is relentless from the start to the end, and it's exciting that RMC coasters have developed such abundantly thrilling layouts like this. At the number 3 spot is Iron Gwazi at Busch Gardens Tampa Bay in Tampa, Florida. From what I've gathered, the past few years have seen a bit of a coaster war in Florida, with many enthusiasts arguing about which of the newest major coasters here, such as Velocicoaster, Stardust Racers, and this one, is the best. In my opinion, Iron Gwazi absolutely takes the cake on this one. This RMC Hyper Hybrid, which opened in 2022, is just about as wild of a layout as one can get on an RMC. The coaster reaches a maximum height of 206 feet and a maximum speed of 76 miles per hour, making it Florida's tallest and fastest coaster. It also features a 91-degree drop, which is just barely beyond vertical. This coaster undeniably features some of the craziest elements from RMC, from its outer bank turns, to its barrel roll down drop, and to its fast-paced outer bank and airtime moments. Because of this coaster being genuinely one of the wildest ones I've ridden, it is so close to being my favorite RMC. However, the only little thing I find to hold it back is its brief duration. It's a crazy ride, but it genuinely feels like it's over in a heartbeat, though I will admit that its abrupt ending adds to that overwhelming feeling of taking its crazy experience in. However, I do know a coaster that fixes this one little issue. That's right, at the number 2 spot is the legendary Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. When I first rode this coaster in July of 2021, it truly changed things for me. I knew it would become my new favorite coaster at the time, but it still managed to blow me away. Opened in 2018, this was the first hyper hybrid manufactured by RMC, and if it wasn't for this ride, there probably wouldn't be an Iron Gwazi, to be honest. The ride reaches a maximum height of 205 feet, with a vertical drop plunging to reach a maximum speed of 74 miles per hour. What this coaster is truly known for, however, is its airtime. The amount of ejector airtime moments throughout this wild layout is just absolutely ridiculous. It's like they found every little part in the coaster that they could possibly put an airtime moment in, and put it with the exception of a few inversions. Not only that, but I find that both of this coaster's 0G rolls, I find those to be a couple of S-tier inversions. What I found to be interesting about this coaster though is that its quality doesn't fully hit until its wild second half, like following its mid-course brake run, where you're just hit with the wildest airtime moments as well as those couple of inversions. Not only is the airtime such a big reason why this coaster stands out for me, but something that pushes it even further for me is its length. Where Iron Gwazi is over in what seems like a heartbeat, this coaster just keeps on going, and the fact that it even has a mid-course proves that, in my opinion. Because of this, even when I managed to ride Iron Gwazi, which many enthusiasts argue is better than Steel Vengeance, I still struggle to find any coaster that proves superior to this one. And I was not expecting to do so for a really long time. Well, that was, until very recently. Something changed. Something I did not expect. What could it possibly be? I don't know how, but I did it. I found what I truly consider to be peak coaster, and somehow I didn't see it coming. Turns out the best coaster I've ever ridden has been around for longer than I would have expected. I am delighted to announce that my new favorite coaster that I have ever ridden is Age Naika at fuji-q Highland in Fujiyoshida, Yamanashi, Japan. I truly thought RMC had everyone beat this whole time, but this coaster might have changed that perspective for me. You know why I didn't expect this to rank this so high? In fact, I even expected Hakuge at Nagashima Spaland to beat it. I didn't expect this because I don't even have X2 ranked nearly this high. Y'all saw it was at number 18, and I was just expecting this to be a bit better than X2. I'd heard it was better, but I didn't know how much. Looks like my expectations have been far exceeded. This coaster, manufactured by S&S Worldwide, opened in 2006. Somehow the best coaster I've discovered happens to be about as old as I am, which I certainly did not expect. It is a successor to what Arrow started with X2, and given what they started, it seems like S&S managed to far exceed with this one. Its layout is similar to X2, being a 4D coaster with flipping seats throughout its layout, although it is taller at a maximum height of 249.3 feet and a maximum speed of 78.3 miles per hour. I also find this to be smoother than I remember X2 being from my ride on that a couple years ago, which allowed me to truly appreciate its wild experience far more than I even expected. That said, there are a couple of jolty flips, but somehow that improved one element in particular, and I think in a way, this is what makes the coaster really stand out for me. When this ride flips into its brake run, which I don't know how they made that such an element, the seat flips so suddenly that it feels like you're gonna fly out of your seat, despite the highly protective ride restraints. And this made this one of the scariest elements I've experienced on a coaster, maybe alongside some hydraulic launches, but still, it really caught me off guard. Maybe my exceeded expectations for this ride mean that I'm underrating X2, but I still don't know how this manages to be so much better. I want to go into even more detail on this coaster, but I truly need to give this ride the complete review it deserves in a separate video. So for now, this is what I think of the best coaster I have ridden to date. Anyways, y'all, that's going to be all for this countdown video, which I really hope y'all enjoyed watching me rank my top 25 favorite roller coasters that I've ever ridden, which I've ridden over 200 coasters. For all these coasters to make my top 25, that's a pretty big deal. That means all of these are some awesome rides. And if you're a coaster enthusiast and you haven't ridden these yet, I would definitely recommend all of these coasters you need to ride at some point in your life as a coaster enthusiast. Also, I want to say, speaking of over 200, I want to say yet again, thank y'all very much for over 200 subscribers, which since I recorded the intro of this video, my subscriber count has grown a lot more. We're already at 221, so I feel like my channel's had a lot of quick growth lately, and I want to thank y'all for that, for subscribing to my channel and watching my videos. I really appreciate the support from y'all. I also want to give a brief little update. I will be moving to college soon, so that means the content on my channel might change a bit, at least until like maybe next summer, because I might not be visiting theme parks as frequently, but I still want to try to make some trips here and there, like when possible. And I still want to work on other kinds of YouTube, like other kinds of theme park related YouTube videos. Like hopefully I can make more like coaster reviews and countdowns. Like I want to make an Age and Echo review. I also want to say I do have a vlog on the way. I filmed it, but I still need to edit it. But since I've started making this video, I have made another vlog, so be on the lookout for that. I also want to say, since I've hit over 200 subscribers, I'm thinking about doing a Q&A on my channel, but if y'all are interested in that, I'd recommend like giving me some questions that I can answer, like maybe commenting some questions, and hopefully I can answer them. Maybe I'll post on like my Instagram story or like a discussion post as well. So let me know if y'all want me to do that, and also let me know what y'all's thoughts are on this ranking video, and if you like have any thoughts on this basically. So anyways, thank y'all so much for watching this video. I really hope y'all enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and be sure to turn on post notifications to be notified of my newest and latest uploads. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye guys.